variety of movements for the last 44 years, the peace movement, the labor movement, the environmental movement, the independent politics movement. He's a Teamster member up in Syracuse, works at UPS, and as you know, greatly enlivened last year's gubernatorial race here in the Empire State. According to some reports, bested a fellow named Andrew Cuomo in a debate that was quite a TV show. We're glad to have him here. Brother Howie.
Well, thanks. What's it like running for a third party? I've run both local and statewide, and there are different kinds of campaigns, but as Steve mentioned, I've been involved in movements since 1967, and long before I thought about running, I put, my body on the line and got arrested, in any nuclear things, any war things, wildcat labor things. Got arrested for single-payer health care last year. I'm about to get busted, I think, for this budget that I campaigned against running for governor. But for me, if we don't have candidates that speak for the movements that are independent of the two major parties on our side of the class line that can't be compromised, then the movement gets taken for granted and we have no power. If they got to compete for our votes, then even if we don't win, we got leverage. And I think that's been missing in American politics since the mid-1930s, when the old left position, you don't cross the class line, was lost. And we have all this effort to try to reform the Democratic Party, and I believe politics has moved to the right, except on a couple questions, since the 30s, particularly on the economic class questions. So I think that's why people should be running. Another thing I think it does for those of us on the ideological left is that it forces us as candidates to speak to all the people. There's a tendency, once you've got an ideological left disposition, to come to conferences like this and talk to each other. And a lot of it's going on to the campuses. The proletariat isn't being organized because a lot of the activists became part of the professoriate. And, they're saying we're teaching about the left, but nobody goes out and talks to the people. When you run for office, you got to talk to everybody. And it really makes you get down to plain language about what we're about. So I think those are all reasons for those of us, whether we're going to be candidates ourselves or support independent candidates, to get involved in electoral activities, because it means you got to speak to the masses of people. Now, local elections you can do with a very small team. And in my experience in Syracuse, where not exactly by design, but it's turned out I've run 18 years straight. For some office or another, the Greens, once I ran, they said, okay, Howie, you got to run again. And pretty soon they had me running statewide. But in those local races, first time I ran, I just got 3%. But I put some issues on the table, like the living wage, which about 10 years later was adopted, although it hasn't been implemented. Maybe we can get into why that is, because it was Democrats said they would do it with the support of Working Families Party. They passed a law, wasn't implemented. Workers had to sue to get back pay. They got the back pay. Then the Democratic mayor switches the contract from municipal to state with the same vendor to avoid the living wage. Just about 2 weeks ago, they voted 6-2, or 8-2, with most of the Democrats voting in favor of a contract for these airport workers where they're supposed to get the living wage on the statute. That's what happens when you cross the class line. But my experience, and I could go down through issues like public power, progressive tax reform locally, and other issues where, even without a big vote, we put issues on the table that then movements were able to be built around, and we bring back election after election, and pretty soon we're at least getting lip service from the two major parties. We got a public power study funded, again sabotaged by a Democratic mayor, but it's coming up again in the budget this year. And we'll get it in there. We got a new mayor, a new council. We'll see what happens. So you run locally, you can do it with a small group and begin to set the agenda and give your movements, your extra electoral activists and activities, some leverage on the local political scene. Now statewide, whole different game, because instead of knocking on doors, you got to get in the media. So right away, you got to have somebody, if it's not yourself, who can write, news releases, knows how to get them out. Mark Dunley back there said he's in the Green Party in New York. He's also been my campaign manager for 2 statewide races and can bang out news releases very quickly. He knows how to work the media. You need people like that. If you go to HowieHawkins.org, you'll see, a lot of news coverage for the gubernatorial campaign. Upstate, not so much in New York City, given the arrogance of the New York media. Example, the reporter for the New York Times, Nicholas Compasori, told us our news releases were spam, stopped sending them. Mark called the ombudsman of the New York Times, gave us the address at the metro section, which bounced. So the only time the New York Times mentioned me was after the debate when they said, and the Green Party candidate spooled out an array of proposals. And didn't tell you what they were. You know, and then we're debating property taxes. The Boston or the Buffalo paper says, you know, Cuomo and Palladino, they want to cap the property tax. I want a state takeover of Medicaid, which is 45% of the county tax levy. That's what it costs the counties in a single payer system. So all they say about me is even the Green Party candidate has a position on property taxes. Doesn't tell you what it is. So, you know, Jello Biafra, another well-known Greek for who then candidates have an answer for that is don't whine about the media, be the media. So we need to develop our own media, independent media, and ways of getting the word out. But you still have to try to get into the mainstream media. So I think it's important to have, you need good staff around you if you're going to be a candidate. Another thing is the election results. You know, I got just under 60,000, which is about 50% more than Stanley Aronowitz got in 2002, or Malachi McCourt got in 2006 as our gubernatorial candidates. And you know, about 10,000 more than Grandpa Al Lewis got in 98. We've run people with some name recognition. You know, Howie, Hawkins, nobody knows me except a few of you. But the larger dynamic was at play. When Al Lewis was running, he was running against Ballone, you know, a right-wing Democrat, unpopular. He couldn't beat Pataki, the Republican. And so a lot of people felt they could vote for the Greens, so we just started with 50,000. Stanley was running against McCall, you know, would have been the first black governor. So all the liberals said, oh, first black governor, we got to vote for him. And then down ticket, you know, we're getting 60 to over 100,000 votes for some of our, like our candidate for comptroller. Same thing in 06. Malachi McCourt's running against Spitzer, you know, the sheriff of Wall Street. So the liberals all felt they could vote for him, and then Julia Willebrand gets 120,000 votes. Malachi only got 40,000 votes. I don't care, you know, who you are. That larger dynamic, I do point that out, kind of sets the parameters in every situation. Doesn't mean you shouldn't run. It just means you got to be realistic about, you know, what you're up against. 1 minute. Okay. Debates are really key, and I'll leave with that point. You've got to fight to get into the debates. I ran between 93 and 2004 and never got into televised debate for various offices. 2005, I got in the mayoral debate. Suddenly everybody said, well, the Greens got ideas. Democrats and Republicans look terrible compared to me because they have no ideas. You know, they had little rhetoric, you know, the slogans about, you know, less government and, you know, reduce taxes, and it's all abstract and vague. And I had concrete proposals. And then I got in what was the next big debate? Congress, 2008. And I usually don't run. That year I said we should run, and I fought the local Greens. It took a long way to convince them I should run, because they were saying, let's just stick to local. And I got into debates again, and the same thing. And now they can't keep us out of debates. Now, in the gubernatorial race, I'm not sure why we got into debates, why it happened. I still don't have a good answer, but what's the paper on Long Island? Newsday and News 12. Yeah, News 12 now being the 24-hour for cable the networks. They decided to try all the candidates. I'm not sure we would have got all those 60,000 votes without that, because we got a real surge of support and recognition after that. So debates are really important when you're running these races, particularly the televised debates and the larger scale races. And last point is we got 50,000 out of our 60,000 votes north of Westchester County. I had a base buildup in Onondaga County where I'm from. Got over 5% there in the media market, closer to 4% in the surrounding counties. Got a little bump in Albany, where I think state workers, thanks to John Flanders here and others who, you know, pointed out I was against the austerity budget that Cuomo had. And then it was pretty much 1% across the state and less than 1% Westchester, New York City, and Long Island. And that's partly because the New York Times attitude was a media attitude all over, and most people didn't know I was running. And besides, New Yorkers think us upstate are just hates anyway, so.